Welcome to Nigeria, and not just Nigeria, this is Makoko. Makoko outside Lagos. It's been here about 100 years. It's a slum area built on stilts. There's about 200,000 people live above the water here, with one of the biggest problems being a lack of education for the children, let alone health and sanitation. Nigeria, together with Togo and Benin, were known as the Slave Coast because it was the centre of the transatlantic slave trade, an evil part of human history. But slavery has been with humans all through history, even approved of in the Bible if you follow that teaching. And in fact, there are more slaves and indentured workers in the world today than there ever have been before. So when we talk about slavery reparations, it's a legitimate discussion to have, but I think a stronger discussion to have is, well, what are we going to do about the slaves that are in the world today? Anyway, I'm here at the Seriki Abbas Slave Museum. This is actually where slaves were imprisoned before put on the ships and sailed off to the Americas. Now, Seriki himself was enslaved, sent to Brazil, and part of the deal of his freedom is he'd come back and be the middleman, finding more slaves and selling them to the slave owners. The Slavery Museum here is actually interesting because it's one of the few that also includes exhibits on white people being taken slaves in North Africa. If we do talk about slavery reparation, and it's a good discussion to have, I don't know what the answer is. You've also got to talk about reparations that North Africans should give Europeans for 1.5 million people taken slaves by North Africans of the Europeans. At the same time, 3.5 million people were taken as slaves from West Africa to the Americas. But where do we draw the line if we have reparations? Do we make the Egyptians give reparations to the Israelis for what happened to Moses and his people? If that's too far back in history and say, no, you don't have reparations for that, then let me ask you this question. Where is the line?
Before the arrival of the Europeans, we have our own form of slavery in Africa before the Europeans arrived West Africa. Or slavery between Africans and Africans. But the one we're talking about now is slavery. When the Europeans came, then they take our people out of the country. But the Europeans would not have come if Africans had not started enslaving the Europeans at first.
That's interesting. You think the Europeans wouldn't have come here if the Africans didn't enslave the Europeans first?
Yes. The Spanish, what do we have to give to the Spanish?
That's true.
What do we have to give to the Spanish? Because the Arabs are the one that dominates the Spanish for over 800 years. The Arabs have to give some of the Spanish some reparation as well.
I also think we should fight more for the people who are enslaved today. There are more slaves in slavery and indentured labour in the world today.
Yes.
And we can look at the past, or we can look at the future too. What about the children that need better education, schools and health? Isn't that a better focus?
Yeah. The first one is printed with an orange color, while the second one is printed with a green color. So the two are talking about two different things. So this green color, this orange color is talking about when the Europeans came to Africa to do the slavery. And this one is talking about the modern day slavery.
Oh, really?
Yes. You know, we have child trafficking today. And so we have, like the one you mentioned earlier, that's what are we going to do to the children? They should take care of their kids because the kids are the future of tomorrow.
Welcome to Benin. It was such a relief to leave Nigeria, and one of the first things you see when you leave Nigeria is much more sensible roads. Second thing you start to see is this statue of the Amazon warriors. Now, a year or so ago, the government decided to inaugurate this statue to commemorate the brave role of female soldiers in the Benin Kingdom's histories. Actually, the women got sick to death of men losing the wars, rocked up to the king and said, "Give us a shot." So they started to win. I reckon that's a great role model for any woman or girl. I'd also turn around and say, the woman came at me with a gun and a sword like that and she asked me a question. I don't care what the question is. The answer is yes. Now we're about to go deep into the reeds to a village called Ganvie and see how whole groups of people living on stilts. The history of this is really interesting because this village used to be on land hundreds of years ago, but to flee the slave takers, not the European slave takers, the other African slave takers, they moved their village from the land into the middle of the lake behind all the reeds so no one could see them. And they live there still today. Ganvie has a population of about 35,000 people, all on stilts. And the village has a restaurant, a hotel, schools, hospitals. The main activity of Ganvie is fishing, and they fish farm. They buy palm leaves from the mainland and set them up in little enclosures, and the fish go in to eat the palm leaves, and that's how the farmers farm the fish. Now, Makoko in Nigeria was a bit of a slum. This is more a cultural heritage and a cultural background. Old people are a lot happier here, and it's a lot cleaner. I still wouldn't swim in the water. And welcome to the historic city of Ouidah in Benin. It's said to be historic because Benin has three capitals: a commercial capital, a political capital, and a cultural capital. And this is the cultural capital. And it's the cultural capital because it's the heart of Voodooism. Now I'm in the sacred forest, because the sacred forest goes back to King Ouidah, and he's said to have died transformed into a tree and still lives, and the tree is here in the sacred forest, as are a lot of statues to gods in Voodoo. Not two guesses to know this is the god of fertility. Now, 70% of the people in Benin are said to be followers of Voodoo, but that doesn't rule you out from being Christian as well. So you can go to church in the morning and do Voodoo in the evening. So what exactly is Voodooism? Because a lot of people think Voodoo from Jamaica and it's witchcraft, but actually it's Vo, which is being relaxed, being patient, and Do is to seek the energy from the four elements: earth, fire, wind, water. And the Voodoo followers aren't particularly exclusive. So directly across the road is the first Catholic church built in West Africa, built in 1909. So I'm in the Python Temple. It's been around 1300 years. Yes, it's linked to Voodooism because there are people as part of Voodoo that worship pythons. And you can tell the people that worship pythons because they have 10 scars on their head. Because if you look at the python's face, cool, it's got 5 holes on this side and 5 on the other. And while we're on the subject of fictional spirit creatures, I'm now in the Cathedral of Her Lady of the Lake in Togoville in Togo. We've now left Benin. Now, Togo gets its name derived from the local language where To means living on top of the hill and Go means living on the back of the hill. This church is important because John Paul II actually came here and preached here, and he did so because they believe that on the second week of November, I think it is, the Virgin Mary appears on the lake. Now, the images painted on the side of the church are all the martyrs of Uganda, because that was the country that Christianity first came, and 11 martyrs on one side of the church and the 11 martyrs on the other all signify the 22 people who were killed as the first converts to Christianity. This is the basement of the slave house in Togo, the place the slaves would last be put before put on board the ship. And the slave masters were up on the ground floor, and this basement was deliberately designed to be the same sort of size and height as the decks on the ship. So you couldn't stand, it's no more than 1.3 or 4 meters between ground and roof. And one of the reasons they put them in here was to get them ready and used to the cramped conditions they would be in the voyage. So they would be laid down and they'd be chained up just in the same way as they were in the ship. This slave house was originally owned by one of the Togolese kings, who leased it to a Scottish slave merchant. And for decades, this was the base of the Togolese slave trade. Again, showing A, how evil it is, and B, how it was often a collaboration between a local king and a European slave merchant, and the local king would send his people out to take slaves, not his tribe, but his enemies. Now, the three slave coast countries, Nigeria, Togo and Benin, have a different colonial history, all getting their independence in the 1960s, and now have got 63 years of running themselves. So what does 63 years of running themselves look like? Well, Nigeria is a basket case. In that 1 hour drive from Lagos to the border, we passed 15 checkpoints, some only separated by a couple of 100 metres, seemingly only there so the customs official or the policeman can say, give me some money. And they didn't do it metaphorically, they had no shame, they did it just that bluntly. And we were able to say no most of the time by simply saying, I gave my last naira, the Nigerian currency, to the street kids. But one said, look, you're Australian, you'll have other currencies, I'll take money in any currency. And I'm like, no. So Nigeria, basket case, don't like it at all. Benin, on the other hand, is starting to clean its act up. It's cleaning the beaches and it's trying to create a future for tourism. Togo is somewhere between the two countries. We've been here about 30 minutes and already been asked for 2 bribes but haven't paid. But as they say, TIA, this is Africa. So we've got Albert and Evans, who have been my guides and travel companions through Nigeria and Togo and Benin. So tell me, Africa, what's the problem? How do you fix it? And how much do you blame white people?
Okay, well, we've been blaming white people for the past 60 years and nothing has been fixed. So within this past 60 years, the white people had actually left Africa and handed out virtually everything to to our leaders. But for the past 60 years, we are still complaining and nothing is being fixed. So right now, the generation of thought of most of us is that we are actually the architect of our own misfortunes as at this present time, because we've had 60 years to fix ourselves, and yet we have bad roads, we have bad education system, we still have bad, nothing virtually works. You know, we tend to survive on our own. We tend to do things on our own. We generate electricity on our own, water on our own. We just try to live like we are surviving in the jungle. So how do I still need to be blaming the white man who is long gone for the past 60 years?
We still have our own fuel and it's still expensive.
So it's quite unfortunate that we are rather the reason why we're in the state we are right now, because our leaders are actually really doing it in the wrong way. A white man tells you to kill your brother. He didn't put a gun to your neck to ask you to kill him. He didn't put a gun to your head to ask you to bring your brother for slavery. He suggested it to you, and you made the decision yourself. So
even the slavery,
I shouldn't blame him. No. He played on your intelligence.
Exactly. Even the slavery was started from Africa.
I always argue. I've been telling people about the slavery thing. I don't believe that the white man is to be blamed 100%, no, because he didn't know where to get the slaves. He had to ask the chiefs, the kings, where can I get the slaves? The kings and the chiefs were the one that took him. We enabled slavery. Our chiefs, our what do we call it now? Our forefathers enabled the slavery, and they are also to be blamed for everything that happened.
So is the current generation of leaders in Africa just the new African slave traders?
Yes. Now, for me, I see them as economic slave traders, economic slavery. That's what we're going through now, and what I call it, civilized form of slavery. Because we live in a country where we have a very large disparity in means of life. You have the leaders living 100% large. You have the masses living below 1%. So we are like being enslaved for the leaders. We do everything. They make money on our resources and they use it for themselves and their family members. So slavery is still going on in this guise.
And just in case you think they're just having a whinge, just have a read of Evan's t-shirt.